It was late in the afternoon when my sister-in-law, Nguyen, came to me with an unusual request. The sun was beginning to set over the rice fields, casting a golden hue over the landscape, and I was finishing up the day's work. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the sound of crickets beginning their evening song. Nguyen approached me quietly, her steps soft on the dirt path, her presence almost ethereal in the fading light. I turned to greet her, surprised to see her out here so late. She was a beautiful woman, slender and graceful, with a quiet strength that made her stand out. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her eyes, those deep, expressive eyes, seemed troubled. "Finn," she called softly, using my nickname, "I need to talk to you." There was something in her voice, a seriousness that made me stop what I was doing. I wiped the sweat from my brow and gave her my full attention. "What is it, Nguyen? Is everything all right?" She hesitated, looking down at her hands before meeting my gaze. "It's about your brother and me." My heart skipped a beat. My brother, Kiet, had married Nguyen a few years ago. They were a good match, or so I had always thought. They seemed happy together, but there had been whispers in the village, rumors that their marriage wasn't as perfect as it appeared. I had dismissed them, but now, seeing the worry etched on Nguyen's face, I realized there was more to the story. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice low, sensing that whatever she was about to say would change everything. Nguyen took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. "We've been trying to have a child for years, Finn. But it hasn't happened. Kiet, he can't give me a baby." I felt a pang of sympathy for her. In our culture, having children was everything. It was the continuation of the family line, a sign of prosperity and blessing. I could only imagine the pressure she and Kiet were under, the pain of wanting something so deeply and not being able to achieve it. "I'm sorry, Nguyen," I said sincerely, reaching out to touch her arm in comfort. "That must be very difficult." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "It is. And that's why I'm here." I frowned, not understanding. "What do you mean?" Nguyen looked up at me, her gaze intense. "I want you to give me a child, Finn. I want you to get me pregnant." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy and shocking. I stared at her, stunned, my mind struggling to process what she was asking. "Nguyen, I can't do that. You're my brother's wife." "I know," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But he can't give me what I need, and you're the only one I trust to help me. Please, Finn. I'm begging you." I took a step back, shaking my head in disbelief. "This isn't right, Nguyen. It's wrong. Yet, he's my brother. I can't betray him like that." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she reached out to grab my hands, her grip firm. "I love Kiet, but I need this. We need this. If we don't have a child, our family will be shamed. I don't want to go to anyone else. I want it to be you." Her desperation was palpable, and it tore at my heart. I knew how much this meant to her, to both of them, but the thought of betraying my brother in such a way was unthinkable. But then I saw the depth of her pain, the way her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and something inside me wavered. I didn't want to hurt her, didn't want to add to her suffering. I cared for Nguyen deeply, had always admired her strength and kindness. What this was something else entirely. "I can't, Nguyen," I said again, my voice firmer this time, though it pained me to say it. "I can't do this to Kiet, to you." She nodded slowly, her hands dropping to her sides, defeated. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't know who else to turn to." With that, she turned and walked away, her figure growing smaller as she moved toward the horizon, where the sun was sinking below the fields. I watched her go, my heart heavy with the weight of her request and the turmoil it had stirred within me. A few days passed, but I couldn't shake the memory of that evening. Nwan's words echoed in my mind, her pleading eyes haunting me whenever I closed my own. I tried to focus on my work, to push the thoughts away, but they persisted, gnawing at my conscience. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the fields, I was once again out working when I noticed Nwan approaching. My heart sank at the sight of her, knowing that this conversation was far from over. She stopped a few feet away from me, her posture hesitant, almost as if she was afraid to come closer. I straightened up, wiping my hands on my pants, and waited for her to speak. "Finn," she began, her voice quiet but determined, "I can't stop thinking about what I asked you. I know it's wrong, but I don't know what else to do. I'm lost." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Nwan, this isn't something we can just do and forget about. It's serious. It's life-changing." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes once more. "I know. But so is not having a child. So is the shame we'll face if I can't give Kiet a son or daughter. Please, Finn. I need you." Her words tore at me, and I felt the weight of her desperation pressing down on me. I wanted to help her, to take away her pain, but the cost was too great. Yet, despite my reservations, I felt a part of me begin to weaken, the barrier I had put up starting to crumble. "I don't know if I can do this, Nwan," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I don't know if I can live with myself if I do." She stepped closer, reaching out to touch my arm. "You're a good man, Finn. That's why I came to you. I know you care about Kiet, about our family. And I know that if you do this, you'll do it with love, not just obligation." Her touch sent a shiver down my spine, and I looked into her eyes, seeing the raw vulnerability there. I knew she wasn't just asking me to help her conceive a child. She was asking for something deeper, something more intimate. It wasn't just about biology. It was about trust, about love, about a connection that went beyond the physical. "Nwan," I whispered, my resolve crumbling. I didn't finish the sentence. The weight of her request, the weight of my decision, overwhelming me. Before I could say anything more, she stepped even closer, her face inches from mine. I could feel her breath on my skin, warm and soft, and the smell of her, earthy, familiar, filled my senses. I knew I should pull away, but I couldn't. I was frozen, caught between my loyalty to my brother and the undeniable pull I felt toward her. And then, in a moment of weakness, I closed the distance between us, capturing her lips with mine. The kiss was hesitant at first, both of us testing the waters, unsure of where this would lead. But as the seconds passed, it deepened, becoming more urgent, more desperate. I could feel the weight of her desire, her need, pressing against me, and I responded in kind, my hands finding their way to her waist, pulling her closer. It was wrong and I knew it, but in that moment, I didn't care. All I could think about was the way she felt in my arms, the way she fit against me so perfectly. All I could feel was the heat between us, the passion that had been simmering beneath the surface for so long, finally boiling over. When we finally pulled away, both of us were breathless, our hearts pounding in our chests. We stared at each other, the reality of what we had just done hanging heavy in the air between us. "Nwan," I began, but she silenced me with a finger to my lips. "Don't," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't say anything. Just be with me." And so, without another word, we gave in to the desire that had been building for so long. There, in the middle of the rice fields, under the setting sun, we came together, our bodies moving in a rhythm as old as time. In the days and weeks that followed, Nwan and I continued to see each other in secret. We met in the fields, in the quiet corners of the village, anywhere we could find privacy. Each time, The guilt gnawed at me, but the pull of our connection was too strong to resist. We were bound by something deeper than either of us had anticipated, something that went beyond the physical act of trying to conceive a child. As the weeks turned into months, Nguyen began to show signs of pregnancy. At first, it was just a feeling, a subtle change in her energy, but soon it became undeniable. Her belly began to swell, and there was a glow about her that hadn't been there before. I was filled with a mixture of emotions, pride, fear, love, and a deep, gnawing guilt. One evening, as the sun was setting and the fields were bathed in golden light, Nguyen came to me with a smile on her face. "Finn," she said, her voice soft and filled with emotion, "I'm pregnant." The words hit me like a thunderbolt. I had known this was the goal, the reason we had started down this path, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way I hadn't fully grasped before. I was going to be a father. I don't know what to say. I stammered, my heart pounding. She took my hands in hers, squeezing them gently. "You don't have to say anything, Finn. Just know that I'm happy. Happier than I've been in a long time." I looked into her eyes, seeing the joy there, but also something else, something deeper, more complicated. I realized then that this wasn't just about having a child. It was about us, about the bond we had formed through our time together. "I'm happy too," I finally said, and I meant it. Despite everything, despite the guilt and the fear, I couldn't deny the love that had grown between us. As Nguyen's pregnancy progressed, it became harder to keep our relationship a secret. The village was small, and people began to notice the changes in her, the way she and I seemed to be spending more time together. Whispers started to circulate, and I could see the suspicion growing in Kiet's eyes, though he never voiced it. The tension reached a breaking point one evening when Nguyen invited me to her house. It was late, and the village was quiet, but my heart was pounding in my chest as I made my way to her door. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't stay away from her. We were in too deep. As soon as I stepped inside, she pulled me into a kiss, her hands tangling in my hair, her body pressed against mine. It was desperate, urgent, and I could feel the weight of everything we had been hiding between us. But then, just as things were beginning to heat up, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Nguyen froze, her eyes wide with panic. "He's home," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Who?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Kiet," she replied, her face pale. "You have to go, Finn. He can't see you here." I pulled away from her, my mind racing. "Nguyen, what are we doing? This isn't right." "I know," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I can't let you go. I love you, Finn." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had known, deep down, that we had crossed a line, but hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. "I love you too," I admitted, my voice thick with emotion. "But we can't keep doing this. It's going to destroy us." She shook her head, her tears spilling over. "I don't care, Finn. I can't lose you. Please don't leave me." But before I could respond, we heard the front door open. Nguyen's eyes widened in panic, and she grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the back of the house. "Go," she urged, her voice frantic. "Please go out the back. I'll handle this." I hesitated for a moment, my heart breaking at the thought of leaving her, but I knew I had no choice. I slipped out the back door, just as I heard Kiet's voice calling out to Nguyen. I made my way back to the fields, my mind racing, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had just done. I knew things couldn't go on like this. Something had to give. In the weeks that followed, Nguyen's pregnancy became impossible to hide. The village was buzzing with rumors, and I could see the suspicion growing in Kiet's eyes each time he looked at me. I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. One evening, as I was working in the fields, Nwan came to me, her face pale and drawn. "Thin," she began, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." I set down my tools and turned to her, my heart sinking at the look in her eyes. "What's wrong, Nwan?" "Hiet knows," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knows the baby isn't his." The words hit me like a hammer, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. What did he say?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "He hasn't said anything yet, but I can see it in his eyes. He's devastated, Finn. He's broken." I felt a surge of guilt and shame wash over me, knowing that I had betrayed my brother in the worst possible way. "What are we going to do?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "But I can't lose you, Finn. I can't go back to the way things were." I looked into her eyes, seeing the love and desperation there, and I knew what I had to do. "Nwan, we can't keep living like this. We have to tell Kiet the truth." She nodded, her tears falling freely now. "I know, but I'm scared, Finn. I'm so scared." "I am too," I admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper. "But we can't hide forever." In the days that followed, we prepared ourselves for the inevitable confrontation. I knew it would be the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was the only way to move forward. Finally, the day came when Kiet confronted us. It was late in the evening, the sky dark and filled with stars, when he came to me in the fields. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, and I could see the pain etched into every line of his body. "Finn," he began, his voice hoarse, "I know about you and Nwan." I felt my heart drop into my stomach, but I forced myself to meet his gaze. "Yet I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." He nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "I know. But it did happen. And now we have to figure out where to go from here." In the end, we decided that the best thing for all of us was for me to leave. I couldn't stay in the village, couldn't face the shame and the hurt I had caused. Nwan and I said our goodbyes in the fields where it had all begun, our hearts heavy with the knowledge that we had destroyed something beautiful. "I love you, Finn," she whispered, her tears falling onto my shirt as she clung to me. "I love you too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "But we can't be together, Nwan. It's not right." She nodded, her heart breaking as she let me go. "I know, but I'll never forget you." With that, I left the village, moving to the north of Thailand, far away from the memories that haunted me. I knew it was the only way to move on, to start over, but it didn't make it any easier. I left Nwan with a part of my heart, knowing that our love, though forbidden, would stay with me forever. Sometimes, love isn't enough. Sometimes, the only way to protect the ones you love is to let them go. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over the vast expanse of the rice fields. The air was thick with the scent of earth and the sound of rustling leaves as a gentle breeze swept through the area. It was the kind of evening that made everything seem peaceful, almost timeless. I had been working in the fields all day, my hands and clothes stained with the labor of the land, when I first saw her. She was standing at the edge of the field, watching me with a curious expression. Her figure was framed by the setting sun, her long hair flowing in the wind. There was something about her that drew me in immediately. Perhaps it was her grace, the way she seemed so out of place yet perfectly at home in the rustic setting. I didn't recognize her at first, but as she walked closer, I realized who she was. It was Som, my stepmother-in-law. Som had married my father-in-law, Surakai, a few years ago. She was much younger than him, closer to my age than his, and there had always been a certain tension in the air whenever we were in the same room. She was beautiful, with a slender figure, smooth skin, and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken thoughts. I had noticed her before, of course, but I had never allowed myself to dwell on it. She was, after all, my stepmother-in-law, and the idea of anything beyond polite conversation had always seemed out of bounds. But there she was, standing in the middle of the rice fields, looking at me with those deep, enigmatic eyes. "Hello," she said softly, her voice carrying over the gentle rustle of the wind. "I didn't expect to find you out here." I straightened up, wiping the sweat from my brow and trying to compose myself. "Som, I didn't expect to see you here either. What brings you out to the fields?" She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. "I wanted to talk to you. There's something important I need to discuss." My heart skipped a beat. There was an intensity in her gaze, a seriousness that made me uneasy. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting slightly as she spoke. "It's about Surukai and me. We've been trying to have a child for a long time now, but it hasn't happened. Surukai, he can't give me a baby." I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but also a twinge of something else, something that felt dangerously close to excitement. "I'm sorry to hear that, Som. I know how much that must mean to you." She nodded, her eyes searching mine. "It does. And that's why I'm here. I need your help, Fan." My breath caught in my throat. "My help? What do you mean?" Som stepped closer, her gaze never leaving mine. "I want you to help me have a child. I want you to give me what Surukai can't." The words hit me like a thunderbolt, and I stared at her, stunned. "Som, I don't know what to say. You're married to my father-in-law. This is impossible." She reached out, her hand brushing against my arm, sending a shiver down my spine. "I know it's a lot to ask, but I've thought about this for a long time. I don't want to go to anyone else. I trust you, Fan. You're kind, strong, and I know you would take care of me and our child." My mind was racing, torn between the loyalty I felt toward my father-in-law and the undeniable attraction I had always felt for Som. "Som, this isn't right. Surukai is my father-in-law. How could I do this to him?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my arm gently. "I know it's wrong, but I'm desperate, Van. I want a child more than anything, and I can't live with the idea of never having one. Please help me." I looked into her eyes, seeing the pain and longing there, and felt my resolve beginning to crumble. I cared for Som, had always admired her strength and beauty, but this was something else entirely. I knew that if I agreed to her request, there would be no turning back. But there was something about the way she looked at me, something that made it impossible to say no. "Som," I began, but she silenced me with a soft kiss, her lips brushing against mine in a way that made my heart race. For a moment, I froze, my mind screaming at me to stop, to push her away, but my body betrayed me. I kissed her back, my hands finding their way to her waist, pulling her closer. The world around us seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us standing in the middle of the rice fields, lost in a forbidden embrace. When we finally pulled away, both of us were breathless, our hearts pounding in our chests. We stared at each other, the weight of what we had just done hanging heavy in the air between us. "Som, we can't do this," I whispered, though my voice lacked conviction. She shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "We already have. And I don't want to stop, Van. I want this. I want you." And so, against my better judgment, I gave in to the desire that had been building between us for so long. There, in the middle of the rice fields, under the setting sun, we crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. From that day forward, Som and I began meeting in secret. We found secluded spots where we could be alone, places where no one would suspect that the dutiful daughter-in-law and her stepson were engaging in an illicit affair. The rice fields became our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the prying eyes of the village and indulge in the passion that had consumed us both. Each time we met, the connection between us grew stronger. What had begun as a desperate plea for help quickly evolved into something deeper, something neither of us had anticipated. We spent hours talking, sharing our hopes and fears, and discovering that we had more in common than we had ever realized. I fell in love with her, deeply, hopelessly in love. She was everything I had ever wanted in a partner, and the more time we spent together, the more I realized that I couldn't imagine my life without her. But there was always the shadow of guilt that hung over us, the knowledge that what we were doing was wrong. Som, too, found herself falling for me. She confessed one evening, as we lay together under the stars, that she had never felt this way before. Her marriage to Surakai had been one of convenience, a union arranged by their families that had never blossomed into true love. She cared for him, respected him, but she didn't love him, not the way she loved me. I don't know what to do, Fan, she admitted one night, her head resting on my chest as we lay in the grass. I love you, but I'm trapped. I'm married to your father-in-law, and if anyone found out about us, it would ruin everything. I stroked her hair, my heart heavy with the weight of our situation. I love you too, Sam. But we can't keep living like this. Sooner or later, someone will find out, and then we'll have to face the consequences. She sighed, her breath warm against my skin. I know, but I don't want to lose you, Fan. I can't go back to the way things were before. I can't pretend that what we have doesn't exist. I tightened my arms around her, feeling the depth of her despair. We'll figure something out, Sam. We'll find a way to be together, no matter what it takes. As the weeks passed, our secret meetings continued, and Sam's belly began to swell with the child we had created together. It was both a blessing and a curse, a reminder of the love we shared and the impossibility of our situation. We knew that we couldn't keep this up forever, but neither of us was ready to let go. It wasn't long before Surakai began to suspect that something was amiss. He wasn't a fool. He could see the changes in Sam, the way she seemed distant, distracted. He noticed the way she avoided his touch, the way she would disappear for hours at a time without explanation. And though he never confronted me directly, I could feel his eyes on me, watching, waiting for me to slip up. The tension in the household grew unbearable. Every time I was in the same room as Surakai, I could feel the weight of my guilt pressing down on me, threatening to crush me. I avoided him as much as possible, but it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. The breaking point came one evening when Sam returned home late after one of our secret meetings. She walked into the house, her face flushed, her hair disheveled, and Surakai was waiting for her. He didn't say anything at first, just watched her with a cold, calculating gaze that made my blood run cold. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Sam froze, her eyes wide with fear. I was out for a walk. I needed some fresh air." Surakai's eyes narrowed, and he took a step toward her. "Don't lie to me, Sam. I know what's been going on. I've known for a while now." Sam's breath hitched, and she took a step back, her hands trembling. "I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb," he spat, his voice laced with anger. "I know you've been sneaking around with Fan. I've seen the way you look at him, the way you avoid me. You're carrying his child, aren't you?" The words hung in the air like a death sentence, and I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I had known this day would come, but I wasn't prepared for the reality of it. Sam didn't deny it. She stood there, her eyes filled with tears, and nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm carrying Fan's child." Surakai's face twisted in rage, and he lunged toward her, his hand raised to strike. But before he could reach her, I stepped in, grabbing his arm and pulling him back. "Don't touch her," I growled, my own anger rising to the surface. "This isn't her fault. It's mine." He turned on me, his eyes blazing with fury. "You betrayed me, Fan. You were like a son to me, and you stabbed me in the back." "I'm sorry," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen, but I love her, Surukai. I love her more than anything." He stared at me for a long moment, his chest heaving with the effort to control his anger. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving Sam and me standing in the wreckage of our lives. The fallout from that night was swift and brutal. The entire village found out about our affair, and we were both ostracized by the community. Surukai filed for divorce immediately, and though it was a messy, painful process, it was also a relief. We could finally be together without the shadow of deceit hanging over us. Sam moved in with me shortly after the divorce was finalized. It wasn't an easy transition. We were both haunted by the guilt and shame of what we had done, but we were determined to make it work. We knew that we couldn't change the past, but we could build a future together. As the months passed, Sam's belly grew larger, and with it, our bond grew stronger. We spent our days working in the fields, preparing for the arrival of our child, and our nights talking about the life we wanted to create together. It wasn't the life either of us had imagined, but it was ours, and that was enough. When our child was finally born, it was as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. We were no longer defined by the mistakes of our past, but by the love we had for each other and the family we had created. The village slowly began to accept us again, and though there were still whispers and sideways glances, we were at peace. We had made our choices, and we were living with the consequences. But we were also living with each other, and that was worth everything. As I stood in the rice fields one evening, watching the sun set over the horizon, I felt a sense of contentment that I had never known before. Sam joined me, our child cradled in her arms, and together, we watched as the world turned golden in the fading light. It hadn't been an easy journey, but it was ours, and we were finally where we were meant to be, together.